Have you ever just stood and looked at a forest or even a simple pond and wondered how it all, well, works? I mean, it looks like total chaos, right? But believe it or not, nature's actually following this incredible set of hidden rules. And today, we're going to pull back that curtain and find out what they are, from the tiniest microbe all the way to computer models that can predict the future.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start big with the basics, what an ecosystem even is and how it functions. Then we'll look at how they change over time. And from there, we're going to zero in on a fascinating scientific model that shows these rules in action, a real-life duel playing out in a digital forest. It's going to be great. Okay, let's dive right into this. First things first, the big one. What exactly is an ecosystem? When you get right down to it, an ecosystem is all about relationships. It's this incredibly complex web that connects everything, the living, the non-living, all together in one place. It's not just some random collection of stuff. It's a living, breathing, self-sustaining system. It's the fundamental building block of all of nature. And you can think of every ecosystem as having two main parts. On one hand, you've got the biotic components. That's all the living stuff. This is the cast of characters, the producers, like plants that create their own food from sunlight, the consumers who eat them, and the decomposers, which are basically nature's all-star cleanup crew. And then you have the abiotic components, the non-living factors, like air, water, soil, and sun. That's the stage where the whole drama of life unfolds. All right, so we've got the pieces of the puzzle, but how do they all fit together and actually work? Let's take a look inside the engine room of the natural world. Turns out, every single ecosystem, I don't care if it's a massive ocean or a tiny puddle, has to do these 4 essential jobs to stay in business. You've got productivity, which is all about creating new life, decomposition, which is nature's recycling plant, and then energy flow and nutrient cycling, which are all about moving those critical resources through the whole system. Let's zoom in on decomposition for a second, because this is just amazing. It's nature's ultimate recycling program. It all kicks off with fragmentation, little critters like earthworms breaking down dead leaves and stuff. Then nutrients leach out into the soil, and an army of microbes gets to work, breaking it all down until it's back to the basic inorganic materials that new plants can use. It's a perfect waste-free loop. Nothing is ever lost, it just gets a new life.
Okay, what about energy? Where does all the fuel come from? Well, it all starts with the sun. Plants, the producers, soak up that solar energy. Then, an herbivore comes along and eats the plant. Boom, energy transferred. A carnivore eats that herbivore. Boom, transferred again. This whole chain of who eats who is what we call a food chain, and each step along the way is called a trophic level. But here's the catch, and trust me, it is a huge one. Just look at this number, 10%. That's it. This represents the shockingly small amount of energy that actually makes it from one level to the next. So, where in the world does the other 90% go? It all comes down to something called the 10% law. At every single step up that food chain, a whopping 90% of the energy is lost, mostly as heat, just from the organism living its life. This incredible inefficiency is exactly why you don't see food chains with like 15 different levels. There's just not enough energy left at the top. It's a hard limit on the structure of life, set by physics. So ecosystems have parts, and they have processes. But here's the thing, they are never, ever static. So what happens when a forest burns down, or when a brand new pond forms on bare rock? The answer is a fascinating and predictable process of change called succession. Now, this isn't random. That's the key. Succession is a surprisingly orderly, almost predictable process. Take that newly formed, lifeless pond. Over decades, maybe even centuries, it doesn't just stay a pond. It slowly starts to fill in, new plants take root, and eventually it can transform into a full-blown forest. And check this out. This is basically the roadmap for that change. In a wet environment, what scientists call hydrarch succession, it all starts with these tiny pioneer species like phytoplankton. Then each new group that comes in changes the environment just enough for the next group to move in. It's like a relay race, from floating plants to reeds, then to shrubs, and finally, to the big finish, a stable climax community, which in this case is a forest. So if the last slide was the map, then this is the beautiful scenery. You can literally see the transformation here. Each community of species paves the way for the next one, turning a body of water into stable, solid ground that can support an entire forest. It's a gorgeous, slow-motion relay race playing out over generations.
All right, now that we've got the general idea of secession down, let's get really specific. We're going to zoom right in on a real-world scientific showdown, a duel to the death between two competing species in a forest. So this all comes from a scientific paper by Nicholas Lanchier, who wanted to build a model of this exact process. And he chose two amazing competitors for his study. In one corner, you have the common bracken fern, and in the other, the mighty European beech tree.
And this is a classic battle of strategies, you know? The bracken fern is the sprinter. It absolutely loves sunlight, and it spreads like wildfire, using underground stems to take over any open patch it can find. The beech tree, on the other hand, is the marathon runner. It's a slow and steady strategist that grows patiently in the shade, spreading by seeds and just waiting for its moment to shine.
Now, the cool part is, scientists don't actually have to wait hundreds of years to see who wins this fight. Instead, they build these incredible models to figure out the rules of the game and predict what's going to happen. They basically create a digital forest to simulate the entire competition.
Now, the model itself is called a particle system, which sounds super complex, I know, but the idea is pretty simple. Think of it like a board game. Red pieces on the board represent the fast-spreading bracken fern, and green pieces are the slow-growing beech trees, and they compete for empty spaces on the board based on a simple set of rules about how they reproduce. So what happens when you run this game over and over? Well, the model spits out three possible futures for our digital forest. First up, coexistence. Under certain conditions, it's a draw. Neither species can totally dominate the other, and they manage to live together in a stable balance.
The second outcome gives us a clear winner. In this scenario, the slow and steady marathon runner wins the race. Over time, the beech tree's patient strategy pays off, and they completely outcompete the bracken fern. The forest becomes dominated by beech trees. But then there's the third outcome. And honestly, this one's a bit of a shocker. Sometimes the competition is just so fierce that nobody wins. The conditions are just right for the entire population, both the ferns and the trees, to go completely extinct, leaving behind nothing but an empty, barren landscape.
So, a digital duel between a fern and a tree, why should we care? Because the outcome of that duel, whether they coexist or one wins or they both die out, directly impacts what we call ecosystem services. And this isn't just nice-to-have stuff. This is the stuff we literally can't live without. We're talking about the purification of our air and water, the cycling of nutrients for our food, providing wildlife habitats, soaking up massive amounts of carbon. These things are fundamental to our survival. When an ecosystem collapses, like in that third outcome, these services just disappear. And that really just leaves us with this one huge final thought. This model gives us a peek into the future of one tiny patch of forest. But as these tools get more and more powerful, what could they tell us about the future of our oceans, our climate, the health of our entire planet? The hidden rules of nature are there, and for the very first time, we're actually learning how to read them, and maybe even predict the outcome of the game.